Simran, are we ready?
Yeah, I think we are ready. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So let's get started.
We're live. We're live. Well, welcome everybody to the first virtual GPAC meeting. It's sixth in our series for the general plan update. As you know, the city has embarked on this ambitious project, and we have been working on this on the project for the last year or so. We've met with the General Plan Advisory Committee, which was appointed by City Council, and they've been helping guide the process, including the community engagement that's been ongoing for the last year or so. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy during these unprecedented times, and I'm really glad to see you all virtually here today. I'm Simran Malhotra. I'm a principal with Remy & Associates. We are leading the multidisciplinary team that was hired by the city to update the city general plan. And this meeting is being held on Zoom for the General Plan Advisory Committee. I'll introduce them in a minute. And it's also being live streamed to YouTube on the General Plan Project's YouTube channel, Palmdale 2045. I'd like to welcome all those who are watching this live on YouTube as well. We look forward to hearing from you during this meeting as well. The members of the public are viewing this, and they can also provide written comments and ask questions through the provided link on the YouTube channel page. We'll cover all questions and comments as time allows. Regardless, all these comments will become part of the meeting record. Please also note that the live stream is slightly delayed from the live event that's ongoing. And finally, please note that this meeting is being recorded. If there are any objections from any of the members of the GPAC, please let us know. I'd like to start with introducing city staff. We have Mike Behan, who's the Deputy City Manager.
Unmute.
Carlene Saxton, who is the Deputy Director of Economic and Community Development.
Hi, everyone.
Megan Taggart, who's a Senior Planner.
Hello, everyone.
Ben Fitz, who's a Senior Planner as well.
Hello.
Okay. From our team, we have Melissa Stark.
Hi.
And we have our team's economists who are on as well, Amitabh Bhartakur with HRNA.
Hello.
Hi, Simran. I'm going to jump in really quick. This is Carlene. We also have additional city staff here since we have economic focus. We have Louis Garibay, our economic development manager. And then we also
I missed Louis.
That's okay. We also have Drew Pletcher, who is our other Deputy Director of Economic and Community Development.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Welcome. And then finally, we have Garrett Rapsilber with HRNA Associates. Okay, so now that we have introductions out of the way, Amitabh, can you advance the slide to the agenda? Wanted to do a brief overview of what will be, what this meeting, the agenda for the meeting today. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Melissa will do a brief Zoom overview of the protocols for this meeting. Following that, we'll have the approval of the draft meeting minutes from the last meeting, which was held in February. And then the meat of the presentation will be about discussing existing conditions for demographics and the economy, real estate trends, fiscal health, and opportunities for the general plan to consider as we work on the work over the next few years. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Go on to the next slide, please. So we have the Pledge of Allegiance up here. If you can all stand and start.
Unmute ourselves.
Yes, we can unmute ourselves.
Begin.
Let's all begin.
I
Pledge
pledge
allegiance
Allegiance to the
Allegiance
flag
to
of the United States of
United
America
States of
and to
America,
the republic
and
for
republic
which it
for which
stands,
it stands,
Nation,
one nation,
under God,
with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you. Okay, Melissa, you're up.
All right, so I'm going to quickly go over some key features of Zoom. I know some of us aren't as familiar with it. So just really briefly, and some of this will be overview because you've already done it to join this meeting. But to start, your audio, you do have the option to use your computer audio or your phone audio. We recommend using headphones in either instance. I think the connection's a little bit better. You can go to the next slide. Once your audio is connected, please mute yourself and remain muted until you are called on. As part of our meeting, we're trying to limit any background noise. And you can do that by clicking the same button that shows the microphone that's circled there. The next slide. Start video. I think all of us have our video on. This is optional. Just a reminder that we are live streaming to YouTube. Completely optional if you'd like to have that on. You can do that by clicking the button here. And if you'd like to turn off your video for any reason, for example, if you need to get up, please do turn it off and you can click the same button to turn it off. Just be mindful of your background because again, we are streaming. You can go to the next slide. If you'd like to ask a question or a comment during the meeting, use this participation nonverbal feedback by clicking the participation button that's circled here. It'll take you to another window where you can click the raise hand option. This will notify everyone that you'd like to say something and we'll call on you to try to keep things organized. And then I think we have one more. Yeah, two more. If something comes up during the meeting and you need some help, whether it's tech-wise, you can chat the host. Please do that instead of disrupting the rest of the presentation. You can do that through clicking this chat feature here, and you can send a note to either me or all of the hosts of the meeting, and we'll try to help you while the meeting is continuing on. Next slide. And then lastly, we do have points throughout the meeting where we'll stop for questions and comments. So if you can try to hold those thoughts until then, that'll be really helpful. If you have something you'd like to say in advance, of course, you can use the raise hand feature throughout. We also have a comments forum for members of the public who are viewing on YouTube. We'll be bringing in those comments and questions throughout the presentation as well. Are there any questions on this brief overview of key features in Zoom?
We can practice raising our hands.
I was just going to say, I'm going to test you and see if you can use the feature. Okay, I'm not seeing anything yet.
Okay.
So I think with that, we can pass it over.
Okay, actually, before we started, I realized I neglected introducing the GPAC members. So sorry about that. Let's start. Tony Avia.
Hello, everyone.
Juan Blanco.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. Had a little difficulties earlier today.
Loud and clear.
Sound great.
Terry Hambra. Teresa Hambra.
Hi, how are you?
Matt Harris,
Hello.
Aurora Hernandez,
Hi.
Pat Hunt,
Present.
Sherry Kanashiro,
Hi, everyone.
Terry Lamping,
Hi, everybody. I miss you.
Joe Parisia,
Good evening.
Jason Zink,
Cheers. Here.
Laura Everett, or sorry, Laura Gordon, she'll be joining.
I believe she
later.
just joined, and
She just,
and she may be getting her audio connected.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
Good. I was
you're welcome.
calling officers at in another organization, so I'm here.
Thank you.
Great, welcome. Okay, I think that was everyone.
No, it's
welcome
not.
everyone. Oh, sorry, Debbie.
Deborah.
Can you
also
see
forgot
me?
me.
I'm very confused right now. I'm not sure if you can even see me.
Yeah, we can
Yes,
see
we
you.
can see you and we can hear you.
Awesome. I'll mute myself then. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
I think you forgot me. That's Deborah.
Rakowski Hines.
And I
Yes.
believe we are, no, Lourdes is here. Okay.
I'm
We
here.
have everyone.
Colby.
Here.
Yeah.
And Colby's here as well.
I still can't find my raise hand button.
There you are. Okay. Is there anyone else that we missed in our roll call?
Okay. Next slide, and Amitabh, you're up.
Thanks, Imran. And thank you, the GPAC members and city staff.
Hi, sorry, Simran. This is Carlene. I just want to make
Yes.
sure that we do an approval of our last meeting minutes first.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. First virtual.
We're all getting used to this new.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry, Melissa, let's remember to add a placeholder slide for that moving forward for future meetings. So the first item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. The draft meeting minutes were included in the agenda packet. Do we have a motion for approval?
This is Laura. I so move.
Just
This is Ron. I'll second.
We need to change the discussion. I raised my hand.
I saw you and I was about to call.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I thought we were raising hands, so I did that.
Okay, so we have Joe
I missed
and
that part
Lourdes.
of the instructions. I'm sorry.
On the minutes, I don't want to take my turn. Okay, on the minutes, we have meeting number 5, part 2, February 19, 2019. Can we change that to 2020?
Oh,
My mistake, yes.
yes, absolutely.
I was gonna call earlier, but I got busy in the office, so sorry about that.
No problem.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I call to approve minutes.
All in favor, raise hands.
It was great. Everybody's
All
doing it
again?
electronically.
Yeah. All against? if you're against, if you can mute and speak up. Okay. Motion passes. So meeting minutes are approved with the change Lourdes suggested correcting the date on the minutes. Okay. Amitabh, you're on.
Good, thanks. And thanks, Carleen, for pointing that out. First, I want to thank the GPAC members. I know that you're probably spending your entire day, doing similar video conferences or meetings or coping with other things, and you'd rather be, attending to members of your family or getting some alone time, but you're doing this for the service of your city, and we really respect that and really appreciate your inputs. So we'll try to make your time worthwhile and get as much valuable input as we can and guidance for the general plan. As Simran mentioned, my name is Amitabh Barthakar. I'm with a firm named HR&A Advisors. We're an economic development consulting firm, and we are part of the larger general plan update team. And our focus is primarily looking at how can economic development issues be incorporated in the general plan? How do you align the long-term strategy of the city, which is the general plan, with sort of market opportunities, and also to inform the economic development element of the general plan. We're actually fairly familiar with the city, having worked on a previous project as it related to the high-speed rail station area development. So we kind of know the market context and how you've sort of come out of the recession, where you are now. But what I'm going to do today, as Simran mentioned, is walk you through what a piece of analysis that we completed as part of the existing conditions report for the city. And that includes an overview of the market and some opportunities. And then we'll spend some time discussing in terms of how to take that information and provide your own qualitative and own personal experiences in guiding the general plan. And I'm also accompanied by my colleague, Garrett Rapsilber. Garrett did a lot of this analysis, so I'm going to throw all the hard questions to him, but he's there to sort of answer, more specific questions and as well as take notes. The presentation is broken into 4 parts. First is an overview of demographics and socioeconomic characteristics of the city, then an overview of the real estate trends and future demand. Then a snapshot of what we call the city's fiscal health, essentially, where the tax revenues come from and how the city is spending money. And finally, a discussion of, what we see as clear economic opportunities and maybe some challenges. We're going to pause after each of these sections because there's a lot of data that we're going to throw out and maybe some complex slides. So for you to ask questions and clarifications, but those are going to be short pauses. And at the end of the meeting, we're going to have a more open discussion, guided by some questions to get your input. So if you don't get to ask a question in the middle pause, hold them to the end so that we can sort of address them as we go along. Before I start, I also want to qualify that this research was actually completed. The existing conditions report was completed in 2019. And a lot of the information is based on the last full year data available, which was the prior year, 2018, the end of 2018. And definitely done before the current economic condition of, as a result of COVID-19 had taken hold. But I also want to emphasize the fact that while there are a number of uncertainties, we should consider all of this information in light of the long-term 25-year planning horizon for the city. So if you look back 20 years, look at the events that we had the Great Recession, we had 9/11. There were pretty life-changing events, but over the long term, there was still a lot of growth. The economy has bounced back all the time. So while there are going to be impacts in the near term, I think we should really keep this in the context of what may happen to the city over the next 25 to 30 years. So that's just in light of context. So let me jump in into the first section. So actually, I'm going to turn my video off because my internet could be unstable at times. Palmdale has experienced tremendous growth in the 80s and 90s, as you know, and even in the early 2000s. But growth has slowed significantly since the Great Recession and has right now stabilized around 160,000 people. The city is also increasingly diverse. There is a significant share of population of Hispanic origin, but diversity is somewhat spatially segregated, with Highway 14 being the dividing line. As you see in this map, the yellow dots are population of Hispanic origin. These are actually distribution of race maps that the University of Virginia puts together, and this was something we looked at the Antelope Valley. So there's some concentration of racial and ethnic groups that you can clearly see. But that's also part of sort of the older part of the city versus newer parts of the city where new population is coming in. So there are various sort of dynamics at play out there. This is a complicated graphic, but this essentially shows.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
Yeah, on the where it shows all the races and stuff like that, the dots.
Right.
It just looks all Hispanic.
Well, that's the reason is because there's a significant share of Hispanic population, and that becomes very apparent on the yellow color.
Yeah, can you send me the a map?
Yeah, we can also send you the link of the website, which from University of Virginia, which puts these maps together.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide is about Palmdale's economic base. So it's a slightly complicated slide. Palmdale has remained a fairly strong job center, particularly for manufacturing jobs. And this is really counter to what's going on in the rest of the region, where manufacturing jobs have been shrinking. There's a lot of growth in industrial development, but all of the industrial development that you see all over the region is largely around warehousing and logistics. So manufacturing growth is really, really something to value and something to protect. So just to explain what this figure is showing, it shows essentially the city's economic base with wages in the bottom axis. So these are average wages for these sectors. And on the vertical axis is growth. If the job sector has grown in the last 10 years, and the size of the circles shows essentially the relative size of the job base. So how many people are employed in that sector for Palmdale. So the more you are towards the top right of this diagram, it means that it's a large sector, or it's a high growth and high wage sector. So clearly, manufacturing and healthcare are big drivers, which is, I think, an important feature to note, just as we sort of take decisions for the future. But there's also a significant share of service jobs in retail and accommodation and food services. And I think that's also particularly important to note because, because of the current pandemic, those are the sectors that are being hit very, very hard. So you really have to balance, how you're kind of taking initiatives and how you're kind of thinking about your economy going into the future in that context. In terms of growth, and these are growth numbers that are being projected by SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments. So,
just 1 second.
Sure.
On the Palmdale economy, it looks like all the high-paying jobs are, in manufacturing and government, finance, and things like that. I think that's what we need to concentrate on, is more manufacturing up here. And more trade schools.
Hi, Jason,
right?
And GPAC.
Yeah.
This is Carlene. Hey, love the interaction and definitely encourage it. We have kind of placeholders within the presentation for questions and to have that dialogue. I would just encourage to wait until that time to ask your questions so that we can get through the presentation. in a timely fashion, because I know everyone doesn't want to be on this Zoom meeting the whole night.
No, I understand that, but
Thanks.
how do you go, you got to have questions on every slideshow, or how are people going to think about what they're looking at?
We're going to stop after this slide. So we're going to take a break after every like 3 to 5 slides, basically.
Okay, sounds good.
Right. So, SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, projects sort of long-term employment and household for the region by city. And a lot of that growth, those growth projections are based on the individual cities sort of, current general plans, what is allowable, what is growth capacity. So, if a city changes its land use configuration, you can actually change that growth capacity. So, I would take these projections with a grain of salt, but SCAG projections show that Palmdale is going to grow significantly, both in terms of employment and population, right? And between now and 2040, these projections show that Palmdale jobs will grow by population will grow by 26% and jobs will grow by 28%. In contrast, the region, the county, jobs will grow by 12%, jobs will grow by 14% and population will grow by 12%. So essentially what it's showing is that Palmdale's rate of growth is almost twice as much as the county. So that's one thing to keep in note, that you are on a path of growth. The central core of the county is kind of built out, and outer areas where there are opportunity to create manufacturing jobs, they're well connected, are definitely have the opportunity to capture future growth, and that's what's being projected. So with that, I'm going to stop here on those 3 slides, which are a very quick overview of what's going on in terms of demographics and economy. And if there are any clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer.
I would just say on the demographics employment projections, if you look, the city of Palmdale is lower than the city of Lancaster. So I'm kind of curious why that is, and why the employment growth is higher in Lancaster, household growth, population growth. I mean, Palmdale is the first city of Antelope Valley. It's location, location, location. We should be the aggressive job growing place. We have Plant 42. We have 17,000 acres of airport land. This doesn't make sense to me.
I think that's a good observation. Now, again, which is why I say that these are SCAG projections, and I think they should be taken into context. But I think the more important part is that the Antelope Valley is projected to grow at twice as much as what regional growth is projected to. Yeah. And I think within Antelope Valley, individual cities can adopt policies and have economic development strategies to capture a higher share of that growth. And that is very much up to us as part of the general plan and the economic development element.
I would just say that this kind of illustrates what I've been saying for years about Palmdale, is that we're not aggressive in getting jobs. All the government jobs are going to Lancaster, and like the college, all the money, all the property taxes, everything is going to AV College to Lancaster on the west side, and nothing's coming to Palmdale. We have a storefront campus, college campus. Why don't we have our own junior college here in Palmdale? It's because Palmdale is not aggressive in getting all these government jobs, which create a lot of other jobs to support those jobs. So I would like this, I just wanted to make that point, because I've been saying this for years, and these numbers just verify everything I've been saying for years.
Good thoughts, but sure.
Well, go ahead and address that question.
No, I'm just making a note of that, but I wanted to ask if anyone had any more specific questions on the information. I think we're getting into strategy a little bit, which I think we're going to discuss at the end, but all good thoughts.
My question is, you say that SCAG's projections, is it projection or mandate?
No, these are projections.
What are the mandated numbers that SCAG's put out?
Those are, we shouldn't conflate the regional housing needs assessment numbers, which is a different set of numbers than their regional growth projections, which are totally different.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Any other questions?
I have 40 slides, so I'll have to keep moving.
Okay. All right.
We just wanted to make one quick reminder for folks. The chat feature, if you wouldn't mind opening that up, we can all send messages. You can send messages to the hosts if you have any issues, or we're able to communicate with you that way. So please do have that open as we continue on.
So quickly go over more specific real estate market trends. As I had said before, Palmdale's residential growth has somewhat slowed significantly since the Great Recession. This is shown in the graph to the left, which presents residential permit activity between 2004 and 2018. You could see that, 2004, 5, 6, there was significant, building activity. And as the recession hit, we really hit rock bottom, all the way down to 2014 or so, and it's been slowly picking up, but hasn't, by no means reached, development activity on residential has by no means reached pre-recession levels. And the same thing's been with, at least this was till the end of 2018, so prices have gone up since 2018. But the same thing is true for single-family home median sales prices, particularly for new single-family home median sales prices. We hit rock bottom around 2011, 2012, and prices have been going up, but they haven't moved up as high as sort of previous highs that we have seen. So on one hand, there's sort of room to grow. Of course, there's going to be impact to that based on the current economic downturn that we may face, but there's definitely room to grow, and Palmdale has actually shown that before. In terms of retail, this is the first one was residential, this is about retail. Palmdale has a lot of retail space. I mean, you have a lot of retail real estate for a city of your size. It's almost 9 million square feet of retail space in the city of Palmdale. And part of this is due to some of the regional serving nature of some of the retail. And while retail vacancies are significantly low, it's about 4%, which is very, very low. It's the same thing with retail rents. We have not seen your average retail rents spring back up since the recession. Retail rents are almost $26, $27 on an average across the board, and they're almost half of that, if not 2/3 of that right now. Well, that basically means that a lot of landlords are essentially not being able to push rents, but they're keeping rents low and making sure that their properties are occupied. But that also, hinders any new development because rents are just not there for new development to pencil out. So, I think retail is a little bit of a challenge, but there's a lot of retail, and the reason is that we're expanding horizontally, and essentially large retail centers are having to follow rooftops further and further away. Industrial, the city's done actually, it's completely opposite of what I've shown for retail. Your vacancies are at an all-time low. You have about 4 million square feet, this is not including the owner-occupied industrial, 4 million square feet of sort of speculative industrial. Vacancies are less than 2%, and post-recession, rents have almost doubled. So this is a sector that is doing very well. Still, we're not seeing a lot of new development here. Part of it is because of constraints on available industrial land in terms of cost of infrastructure and infrastructure needs. And if we can sort of unlock that roadblock, we definitely see an opportunity for Palmdale to keep continuing to grow that particular market sector. Office, as I had mentioned, and when you saw the bubble diagram, most of the city's job growth has been in the manufacturing sector. And as a result, there is not a lot of new office development. Generally, office rents are low, and almost about 35% below pre-recession highs. And we anticipate any new office growth is likely to be driven by demand from population growth and growth in the manufacturing and healthcare sectors to support a larger ecosystem of services. But right now, we're not seeing kind of the rents that can support new ground up development. So it'll have to be sort of a churn in the office market. And also the amount of office space that you have is not a significant amount. So it's really your people are going out to other areas to work in sort of Class A office jobs than offices being located within the city. And most of the offices are basically service related offices that populations demand. And last but not the least, hospitality. And that's another sector where the city has actually done pretty well. That, you know, in recent years, largely driven by long-term stay and business travel demand from the aerospace industry. Although they may be hurting right now a little bit, if the fundamental demand drivers remain strong, this is an area of further growth. Palmdale's room rates have been consistently increasing along with occupancies. And also note that, you know, hotel development is a significant source of tax revenue for the city. So thinking about this sector as also diversifying your fiscal base is an important consideration. So as part of our analysis, we also looked at potential demand between now and 2045 for all of the uses. And one of the important points to note here is that Palmdale is a very large city by land area, and your general plan would likely have a lot more development capacity than there is market demand over the next, say, 25 years. So, you know, you're physically very, very large. So I think it's a really important consideration from a general plans perspective or the economic development elements perspective to think about where growth should be focused and which are the areas of greatest opportunity. In general, our analysis estimates demand for between 14 to 20,000 residential units over the next 25 years. Not a lot of retail, you know, about 750 to 1 million square feet of retail. Probably there needs to be a lot of repositioning of existing retail. So you may not see new retail being built in significant square feet, and retail's been struggling all over the country, and you're not alone. Industrial could be a significant opportunity if we can actually get over the infrastructure roadblocks. 3 to 5.5 million square feet of industrial, market-driven industrial. Office, we still think it's modest, but again, if in the way out in the future when there is high-speed rail, we have the airport sorted out, there could be additional office demand that's generated out here. But right now we're thinking about 1 million square feet or so of office over the next 25 years. There is significant room for growing the hospitality sector, you know, between 800 to 1,000 rooms over additional rooms over the next 25 years. Again, I mean, what we have on the other side of the column is build out capacity. You have significant build out capacity. So it's a question of where to focus the growth. Clearly, there's more nuance to these numbers in terms of actual near-term opportunities and development strategies. For residential, still feel that the near-term opportunity is single family, as multifamily rents and construction costs are not fully aligned. But there's clearly demand for multifamily, and we've heard this subjectively that a lot of the workforce on the manufacturing and the high-tech sector would actually demand multifamily. It's a question of, you know, can we push the rents up? Is the market going to push the rents up to a point where you know, market rate development at the appropriate density is viable? We definitely see that happening within the planning horizon. So we you know, probably sooner rather than later. So we really need to think about where to plan for it. There is little near-term retail opportunity, but we think we should think of creating retail and other opportunities near the employment hubs as amenities, and perhaps think about more what we call experiential retail, you know, things like outdoor dining, you know, breweries, entertainment, as primarily as an amenity. Thinking of where your future workers are going to demand to live here and what your future residents are going to demand. Infrastructure upgrades, as I mentioned, are going to be a critical factor in expanding industrial. But I think we should also start thinking about the next generation of industries. We've really done well with the aerospace sector, and how can we expand that aerospace ecosystem by attracting their suppliers and other industries to co-locate? Is it a matter of space and infrastructure? And then, once you have a cluster of knowledge-based industries out here, how can we expand that to attract other related industries, advanced manufacturing? What are going to be the next generation of industries that we should be focusing on is another thing that we should probably think about a little bit more. Near-term office is perhaps more focused towards smaller medical and service offices. There is a healthcare sector growth opportunity, which has done well. We think we can leverage that. And hospitality has room to grow and will track employment growth. In the near term, it is focused more on long-term stay and clustered near existing amenities like the freeway and retail. But in the future, other central locations are likely to become viable. But I'm going to stop. Any clarifications, questions? I see a raised hand.
I had a question in regards to the key economic opportunities and needs page. There's been discussions on previous council meetings about looking at enhancing like the studio industry or the film industry. And
right.
Would that fall under industrial, or would that fall under office, or is that like another category that we're not discussing?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. They get classified under office jobs, but they don't use office space, right? They use very different kind of space. And you're seeing that right now being focused in places like Culver City and Burbank, and a little bit in like Playa Vista. So the entertainment industry, as you know, it's got like a lot of ecosystems. There's the actual sound stage and production, then there's like post-production, which require more office type of environment. Then there is sort of, field shoots and amenities and other things that are, requiring different kinds of space. So it's an opportunity. The high value part of it is really clustering in areas where the talent is. They're in like Burbank, Playa Vista, and Culver City is like, that's the trifecta. I think the competition is going to also come from other amenitized locations in more urban areas, which have industrial type of uses available, like El Segundo and Hawthorne and the South Bay. So I think it could be an important part of our strategy. We really need to think about what particular part of the entertainment industry are we going to be competitive for.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the hurdle with the infrastructure? The financing, geographical, what is the issue?
I would let city staff jump in. I think there are a couple of sort of parallel issues. One, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Carlene, there are some water utility issues in terms of who provides what utility. And then there is some basic infrastructure costs of drainage and flood control in certain areas, which just requires an upfront like bulk of money. It's a question of whether the city is going to borrow the money and put that infrastructure in. Are we going to have a mechanism to pay for it? But if those development costs which are kind of offsite development costs, are kind of taken care of, it makes some of these larger parcels much more developable.
Thank you.
Actually, Luis Garibay is going to step in just to provide some additional information.
Are you on mute, Luis?
There we go.
Oh.
Good evening, everybody. Hey, so I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of these issues. Drainage is a big challenge, and from a development standpoint, developers don't want to put in a $5 million investment up front for a project that may not pencil out on the back end of it. So what we're trying to do is be a little more strategic about how we create public-private partnerships with development community And a lot of our key undeveloped areas that would be considered very prime real estate for those that are familiar with the area. The areas between Sierra Highway and 10th Street West, Avenue M to probably all the way down to Rancho Vista. There's a lot of undeveloped land that you would think would be key prime real estate, and it is, but there is a significant investment that needs to be made. So we're exploring different options now for long term to be able to provide some of the financing to be able to make those sites a little bit more development friendly.
And if I can just add, at the last GPAC meeting, members of the GPAC worked on land use alternatives, which had a focus on those areas where there's more potential for development, but also highlighted the constraints that need to be dealt with in order for that development to occur.
Should I keep moving on?
There are no others. Yes, please.
We had two other questions, I think. Teresa, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I had a question. I noticed with the land use, all the different options that you talked about, you didn't mention anything about keeping land as far as in a natural state, because I don't want to see Palmdale turning into a concrete jungle.
Right.
We have that already. I don't want to be there. That's why I'm up here.
No, that's an excellent point. I should probably qualify. This is a subset of land uses, right? These are just, what I'm talking about is sort of privately driven commercial development opportunities that Palmdale has. We're not even talking about, public facilities and community facilities and open space and parks and other things, right? So this is very much focused, because I'm taking the economic development view, but you're absolutely right. I mean, your natural assets and preserving your natural assets, and we'll come back to that as an economic strength actually later, because you do have unique assets which need to be preserved, which is almost like an attraction strategy for some of your future residents.
Okay, thank you.
And then next we had Jason.
Yeah, I just have some comments. The real estate recovered in LA Basin in 2012. Here we are in 2020, and we still haven't recovered fully. So my main point is we need to start promoting Palmdale, and that needs to be one of the things of this general plan. You look at all the property, you have the projected of what SCAG says, and then what we have, and of the manufacturing. It says manufacturing. It says through 2045, we're going to have 71 to 71 to 126 acres of developed property by 2045. But yet we have 5,051 acres of build out capacity. We need to start focusing on manufacturing. In Georgia, the state of Georgia, they just built 2 battery factories, 2.5 billion, a Korean company. Yet LA doesn't have 1 battery factory. It doesn't have 1 solar manufacturing facility, but yet we're the #1 market in the country for solar and battery use. I just want to make this point out that we're not doing everything we can to push high-paying jobs and jobs in Antelope Valley. We have all this land, we have all this infrastructure that's already in, and we're not promoting Antelope Valley. We're not promoting Palmdale. And we're letting all the jobs and all our property taxes go to the city of Lancaster. We need to start doing more. If you look at the hotel trends, it'd be nice to know if these hotel rooms, like who's staying there? What's the reason they're staying there? Is there for visiting? Is it because of Plant 42? What? If we could get some more.
A large part of the hotel demand is driven by Plant 42 and the defense contractors, because I think you're absolutely right about the solar and some of the 21st century energy related sort of manufacturing that you should be able to attract, but also the defense contractors, a lot of their suppliers and contractors are actually in other locations like Florida and Texas, and they fly in, they're here for the week in a long-term stay hotel or a couple of weeks, and they're not actually staying here. So they have a lot of people that they're generating going in and out. And with a commercial airport, you may be able to actually attract some of those businesses back out here and more proximate to Plant 42 itself.
So Plant 42 is pretty much paying for all these hotel rooms, correct?
The ones that are staying there, they're being paid for by their individual, indirectly.
Yeah, the contractors at Plant 42. What I'm saying is, so these people are getting paid high dollars. They're staying in Antelope Valley, and there's nothing to do. Maybe Palmdale and this committee should look at maybe creating a casino in Palmdale, so these people can spend money. We can create jobs, create tax revenue, and get all this money that's coming in here. But there's nothing to do except go to go out to eat and go see a movie. We got to create some kind of destination of entertainment for these people. So all this money, it will be spent in Palmdale. It's not just going to go somewhere else where these people take trips to, other places. Why can't we support casinos in Palmdale?
Jason, this is Simran. That's an idea we should consider. In the interest of time, I'd like to move on, and we can circle back to that concept later on if there's time. But we'll certainly make a note of that.
Can you tell me how many hotel rooms we have in Palmdale compared to Lancaster and LA County as average? Can you get that information to me?
Yes, it's in the presentation. We're anticipating.
The number of hotel rooms in Palmdale is now 1,600. I don't know offhand how many are there in Lancaster. 1,600 is a lot of rooms, but you still have a lot more room to grow.
And the other thing is Santa Clarita Valley has a hub where entrepreneurs can come together. It's called an Incubator Hub, where they can come together and create jobs. If we want to attract the movie industry and studios and stuff like that, why don't we have a hub, an incubator, to promote that with Antelope Valley College?
I think these are sort of, we have one more section. I think these are excellent ideas. And I think we have one more section, at which point, I think it really ties well to some of the comments that you're making, at which point we really get into like what exactly we should be thinking about and what exactly we should be doing. I think it'll be valuable to get back into that discussion after just a few more slides.
I'm just telling you guys where we're losing out.
Amitabh, before we move on, there's a question from the public. And it asks, do we know if recreational sports leagues, softball, soccer, etc., impact the occupancy rate of the hotel industry?
They do. They do, but that's also highly competitive, but they do. Because a lot of, if you look at Riverside County or San Bernardino County, because there's a real dearth of soccer fields and other recreational sports facilities in sort of central LA, central Orange, and central San Diego County. Most of these facilities are being pushed more and more outwards to sort of the Inland Empire and other places. And they are driving because so many people travel there for recreation sports. They are driving some room nights. It's not a huge driver of room nights. I don't think it's going to drive the scale of room nights that is actually currently being driven by the jobs, but it does have an impact. Particularly, it drives more weekend rooms, and that kind of complements the weekday rooms that are being driven by the jobs.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd also like to note that the presentation will be available on the project website, which is palmdale2045.org. And we'll also post a recording of this meeting. So if someone wants to listen to the entire presentation later, they can view it in its entirety.
Okay, I'm going to move on. So this section is more about the city's fiscal health, which essentially what are the city's revenues and expenditures as sort of city government. And I think this relates back to some of the comments that were made earlier in terms of taxes and tax revenues and where can the city find money, et cetera. You know, one of the things we do, because it's often hard to figure out how you are doing fiscally just by looking at your data alone, we typically compare fiscal costs and revenues to your neighbors or other similar cities. And to keep the measurements all the same, because all of the cities that we look at are different sizes and different mix of jobs and housing, we try to create sort of a singular metric across the board, often called an equivalent dwelling unit, or EDU, which converts total jobs and households into one number, and basically assumes that, hey, a worker also spends time in the city. You may have 100 households, and if you have another 100 jobs in the city, those 100 jobs are spending at least a third of their time in the city, and they should be counted as a third of a resident, you know. And so we take all of the jobs and all of the households, and we, you know, convert all of the numbers into the equivalent dwelling unit figure and look at them together. And it helps us measure a city's taxes and costs on an apples to apples basis. So we compared Palmdale to Lancaster, you know, and Santa Clarita, which are sort of your nearby neighbors, as well as to Victorville, which is a little further away, but another city with sort of similar context, you know, to get, but different size, to get an idea of how you're doing. So an interesting thing is that municipal revenues come in very different colors. So what you often hear about tax revenues, they go into what's called the general fund, and the general fund is the money that the city's discretionary revenues and costs are made of. So it's money that is not earmarked for a specific purpose. It's budgeted, but it comes in from tax revenues and goes into one bucket, and it gives the city council, you know, discretionary powers to actually spend the money. While there are other monies that come in that are already earmarked and they come from a particular source and they need to be spent on a particular source. And I think the most important bucket of that kind of money is money that comes from special assessment districts, like, you know, community facilities districts that are in various parts of Palmdale to provide services, you know, landscape assessment, lighting assessment, other CFDs that are out there. You cannot, for example, take money out of a CFD for a particular area and spend it in another area to do something else. So they're earmarked. So we typically look at general fund as the core, you know, cost and revenue generator, and then we compare what other sources are coming in. And if you see, if you combine all of the revenues that Palmdale gets, about 50% of that actually goes to the general fund. And the other 50% is on sort of more non-general fund discretionary revenues. That's because a large share of Palmdale services are provided through special assessment districts. This is not that different from you know, a lot of the other cities that we looked at, except for Victorville. And I think Victorville doesn't have as many special assessment districts, and that's one of the reasons. And they rely on their general fund much more. Nothing remarkable. It's just one thing to note. In terms of general fund itself, where most of your tax revenues go, we looked at how diverse sort of your overall sources of revenues are. You know, about 33% of Palmdale's revenues comes from property taxes, about 6% from hotel taxes, 30% from sales and use taxes, and 8% from franchise fees, 15% from licenses, and about 8% from other sources. It's a fairly diverse stack, and honestly, I was a little bit surprised, but it's still pretty heavily dependent on sales and property taxes. You know, you're a low property tax city, and as I mentioned, you have a lot of retail, so you do have sales taxes that come in, but if that retail gets impacted by an economic downturn, or there's suddenly an oversupply and there's some competition from somewhere else who sucks some of that out, there is going to be an impact on your overall revenue. So right now, about 65% of your revenues are just coming from those two sources. In terms of your historic general fund revenues, you know, yes, I mean, it was very clear that your overall share of general fund revenues has changed over time. Back in 2005, almost 50% of your general fund revenues used to come from sales and use taxes overall. And right now it's about 40%. So your sales tax resource has decreased over time. Your property tax dependence has increased over time. And new revenue sources like hotel taxes have actually increased and done a little bit better. Things like franchise fees have remained fairly constant as a share of overall general fund. And the other thing to note, this is actually Palmdale's revenues looking at 2005, 09, 12, 15, and 18. Your overall general fund revenues took a big hit during the recession. It has recovered, but up to 2018, I mean, it took from 2005 to 2018 to come back to 2005 levels. So it did take a long time to actually come back, you know, and the city had to really, you know, tighten its belt to keep on moving and provide services. Here are sort of the key tax rates that are applicable to the city and how they compare. And except for Victorville, all of the cities that we compared with, they're all low property tax cities. So the city of Palmdale on an average gets about 6.5% of the 1% property tax that is levied. All two of your neighboring cities and yourselves, your total sales tax rate is about 9.5%. This is lower than the state mandated cap of 10.25%. So there's some room for your sales tax to grow if voters approve. And your transit hotel tax is similar to Santa Clarita, but higher than Lancaster, which is honestly not a bad thing because actually your hotel occupancies have not been impacted by it, and your room rates are going up, and we're seeing more hotel development happening here. So developers like the location, and you know, if the extra 3% is not making an impact, it's actually bringing revenues to your general fund. And none of the cities that we looked at actually have a utility users tax. Most of the cities now in the LA basin have either considered or have a utility users tax, and that's something to think about in the future, and in the context of, you know, how that may impact your overall competitiveness. Looking at expenditures, if I compare expenditures on a per equivalent dwelling unit basis, the metric that I mentioned before, actually Palmdale has the lowest general fund expenditure per EDU. And, you know, city staff may, you know, shed more light on it, but it seems like the city really had to tighten its belts during the recession and actually has managed, you know, a fairly disciplined approach to fiscal costs. So, you know, and is trying to do more with its resources. So, you know, it's not a lot lower than the other cities, but it is, you know, significantly lower than, let's say, Victorville, right? Part of it is because you also have contract services, and part of the reason that, you know, the public safety costs of Santa Clarita is lower is, again, my understanding is that their contract arrangement is probably a little more favorable than Palmdale's for public safety. So I think public safety is your biggest cost item, which is not surprising, but it's significantly larger than what Lancaster spends as a share of their total general fund expenditures, and definitely larger than what Santa Clarita spends. The point that I made about the city tightening its belts and trying to do more with less is also evident with city employees. We look at typically how many full-time equivalent city employees are there for 1,000 equivalent dwelling units. And Palmdale has the lowest amount. And my sense is that this is part of the city being conservative in terms of not hiring too fast as it was coming out of the recession. I have seen some budget reports which have talked about additional hiring as the city is growing, but it has maintained a fairly modest FTE per 1,000 DUs and kept the city moving. A few fiscal health considerations. I think we talked about it. And the first is sort of, how do we expand our tax base for key sectors? I think there are two levers we have. One is sort of increased supply of certain things that actually generate taxes. So the hospitality industry and how to support that and grow that really comes to mind. On the other side, increased demand. How do you attract more households and increase spending power of your local market to capture more dollars in local retail and attract more retailers, right? So you have to think about both of these things. Thinking about service costs, you're a really spread out city. While you're providing services, through CFDs, there are certain services that are just more inefficient. People, a fire station or police or other services have, or even parks and things like that, have to be really spread out, and you need more of them, and it becomes inefficient on a day-to-day basis. So thinking about how to, manage growth in a manner that it capitalizes existing concentrations of service delivery capacity would be interesting, right? Would be an important consideration. So if there's already capacity to provide more services in an area and there is some room to grow there, you're a very large city, so can we actually grow in there? And can that actually create some efficiencies? Thinking about the special assessment districts continually and making sure that the maintenance agreements are up to date and actually covering the cost at a real level of service that's required is important. And last but not the least, opportunities to diversify your tax regime. I think there is room, particularly in the sales and use tax. And what every city is doing, if you see the number of ballot measures that have come out in the last couple of elections, where local sales tax measures to take, if there is any additional capacity left on the sales tax, to put it in the general fund is really increasing aggressively, primarily because most cities are fearing the fact that if we don't take it, somebody else, like the county, is going to come and put a measure out there which is going to take that capacity away. So I think it's an important consideration for the city to think about if there's a way that you can actually think of capturing that local sales tax. In the future, thinking about utility user tax or transit occupancy tax increases, not right away, but over the your 20-25 year time horizon would be an important consideration. So I'm going to stop there. I think we're just to the last part of the.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to make a statement. I think the last elections kind of pointed out that ballot measures taxing people more money is getting old. I think people are tired of adding on to their tax bill every election year. So it's something that we probably don't want to count too much on in the future. And I got a question about private enterprise financing in the area for residential tracts. Have we made any headway on getting our red line turned to pink or white or whatever? Green?
It might be a question for the city. In terms of, you say private developers are financing their own infrastructure, and if banks are lending, is that the question?
We've been redlined up here since the Great Recession, and getting financing for housing tracts has been difficult. And I know the city's been working on it. Have you heard anything new in regards to that?
I haven't heard anything specifically, and honestly, I don't know how the financial market is viewing it, but I can see one of the challenges has been that the home values had not recovered fully from pre-recession levels. So there is like a fair bit of nervousness around that. And I think that may be one of the reasons why there may be some financing challenges to projects.
We had a question from the group through the chat feature asking about property tax, the property tax rate that we showed, and if that included things like Melrose or other funds.
No, that doesn't include Melrose. It is just the base property tax out of the 1%.
Pat, this is Mike Behan. We have reached out to our legislators about that issue, and they are aware of it. I wish I could report that we have good news or updated news, but we do not as of yet. But we have informed them. They are aware.
Thank you, Mike.
Should I keep moving to the?
Jason has a question.
Yes, if you look at the first side, the peer cities, you'll see Palmdale, occupied dwellings and employment equivalent. Palmdale has 46,000. Lancaster has 51,000. All the jobs are going to going to Lancaster over Palmdale. Because I really wish the city of the city council was watching this right now and went over these presentations that you guys are presenting, because this just shows everything, that everything is going to Lancaster. 46,517 compared to 51,702. Yet Palmdale is the #1 city when you come to Antelope Valley. It doesn't make sense. Look at the general municipal revenues. Palmdale, $2,745. Lancaster, $2,139. So Palmdale is collecting more money than everybody, including Santa Clarita or Victorville. General fund tax revenue. Palmdale, $1,385. Lancaster, $1,367. Then you look at all these others. And then it says other. Lancaster, 22%. Why is Lancaster collecting 22% compared to 8% of Palmdale? We're getting more grant money, that's why. Great recession experience. You look at this, Palmdale Historic General Fund tax revenue. In 2005, 49.8 million. 2018, 49.7 million. We're collecting just as much money, even more if you count 2019 and 2020 revenue, than we've ever had. The city of Palmdale is collecting more tax revenue, property tax, transit occupancy, sales tax, franchise tax than it ever has in the history of the city of Palmdale. Tax rates. You look at Palmdale, 6.64. Lancaster, 6.59, Santa Clarita, 5.62, Victorville. Okay, I'll tell you, Palmdale's collecting more than
Jason.
No, I want to say this is important. Palmdale and Lancaster and Santa Clarita were incorporated at a time when, at a time when the state said that you couldn't take more property tax. But the city of LA is getting 28% of the property tax revenue from the 1%, while Palmdale and Lancaster are only getting 6.5%, and Santa Clarita is even getting less than that. Tom Lackey and Scott Wilkes should be having legislation to make sure that the fight for Antelope Valley so we get more property tax revenue. Why is the city of LA getting 28% of property tax revenue, and Palmdale, Lancaster, and Santa Clarita Valley are only getting 6.5%? General fund expenditures. Okay. $1,163 Palmdale is, right? Lancaster, $1,308. Santa Clarita, $1,313. Victorville, $1,632. Where's all the money going in Palmdale? They're banking it. City employees, Palmdale only has 4.3 compared to Lancaster, 5.1. Santa Clarita, 5.4. Victorville, 10.5.
Jason, Jason, this is Mike Behan. We understand your point. We're going to move forward. Go ahead, Simran. Thank you.
Go ahead, Amitabh.
Good. A quick overview on sort of, what we heard and trying to summarize these a little bit in terms of what are the economic opportunities and what are sort of our challenges. I think the strength, obviously, that you have a large and diverse population. There is sort of large amounts of land available for development, unlike most of the county. Most of the county is land constrained. However, because of some of the connectivity challenges, a lot of the growth has been going to Inland Empire as opposed to coming up to the Antelope Valley. Proximity to the LA metropolitan area, I think this is important. I think when you think about it, you're within the orbit of one of the largest sort of economies and the largest, agglomeration of economic activity in the country and in the world, right? So there is sort of a big opportunity to capitalize on sort of all of the things that are happening in the LA basin, in the LA region, not just the city of LA. You're still kind of a lower cost option of housing compared to the region, so it's attractive to attract sort of a workforce and provide them with a quality of life. There are jobs that support solid middle income households as well as higher income households. And then there is access, but hopefully access is going to be further enhanced with in the future with high-speed rail and perhaps with sort of commercial air connection that just can create, and unlock tremendous opportunities. On the weakness side, while you're part of the LA metropolitan region and you can take benefits of it, you're still kind of further away from the core, economic centers of LA. One of the things that we mentioned about the studios and other areas, while real estate and availability of land is an opportunity, a lot of the workforce wants to be in sort of the urban areas. There is still a high out-commuter population. A significant amount of people are driving out to jobs in other locations or taking the train, which is not necessarily a weakness, but there is an opportunity. Maybe we can turn that into a strength, so that you have a workforce here, and in the future, maybe the workforce can find opportunity for jobs locally. There is a disconnect, we think, between residents' skills and job opportunities. I think somebody mentioned this. A lot of the manufacturing jobs that are here in Plant 42, which are high paying, either a large share of that workforce is actually not living in Palmdale or living in other areas, or the residents who are living in Palmdale are working somewhere else. What we found that the overlap between residents who actually live and work here in the sectors that are growing is a very small share. So how do we actually develop strategies for more of your workforce to live in Palmdale? And how do you attract jobs that provide opportunities for people who actually live here today to work probably more closer to where they live? There's generally, if you look at some of the competing areas, there is lower educational attainment in the city, and then that makes it, and that is a disconnect actually when we see that you have a lot of high skill, high paying jobs, but when you look at the resident population, their general education attainment is lower for those larger high skilled jobs. So there's a disconnect, and I think providing opportunities for the next generation and skill growth is probably an important factor. And there's sort of less job diversity. You have healthcare, you have manufacturing, but there's not a wide choice of jobs that somebody can get nearby because you're part of in one part of the city. So if there's a young high school graduate, they would rather move out and be somewhere else. And we've heard that it's very difficult to attract someone back because there's only one or two kinds of jobs that are available here. but those are good jobs still. And then there's low jobs to housing ratio. I mean, I think there are more housing opportunities that are need to be provided, and probably increase the jobs front as well to increase jobs to housing ratio. In terms of key opportunities and needs, you know, we had sort of 6 ideas, and some of the things that we heard actually, some of the speakers talk about. I think there are a number of opportunities the city could capitalize on. First, the commitment of federal funds to aerospace could be built out further. You know, while Palmdale now has a strong base on the aerospace contractor activity, I've repeatedly said how to bring the larger aerospace ecosystem is an opportunity. And the amenity base and infrastructure, if we can actually start doing that for aerospace, we can probably start attracting other manufacturing sectors that would stay in California. And I think that's part of the industrial strategy we need to think of. Healthcare expansion is another opportunity. There is sort of a seeds of healthcare services. There could be an opportunity to build on that. The airport and future high-speed rail, although slightly further away, are of course transformative opportunities, and the city's already done a lot of work thinking about how those could be capitalized. Finally, thinking outside of the box, you know, I think it goes back to the open space comment. Can Palmdale think of you know, attracting the creative class, artists, and sort of, you know, cultural aficionados to think about, well, you've got an affordable market, you've got this great nature, and everybody's getting priced out. Can we kind of really package our amenities, both in terms of open space and affordability and access to nature, in a way that makes it much more attractive for new residents to be attracted here? It's only a question of providing them the economic opportunity and job opportunities that go along with it. There is also an idea being floated around, and I think somebody mentioned this, the idea of a 4-year college as an anchor. You know, to see it, if you've looked at the recent state budget, I mean, the education sector has taken the brunt of the current budget balance. So it's probably a long-term strategy, but there could be private entities as well who may be interested in coming and locating here. You know, needless to say, like, we cannot think about these long-term opportunities without ignoring the current public health crisis and its impact on local businesses and residents, right? We did all of this, and yes, we're looking at long-term. There is something going on we probably cannot ignore. And when you think about a public health pandemic or any other sort of, you know, massive shock to the economy, it's almost like a disaster recovery that the city has to go through and think about. And we typically think of this in sort of 3 stages of recovery. And I think it's an important consideration when you think about a recovery framework and how that ties to your economic development strategy and general plan. The first phase is typically an emergency response where your primary objective is to keep everyone safe. There's usually a lot of confusion during this phase due to the impact of the shock and mixed messages from various levels of government, public and private response, etc. The next phase is sort of what we call a stabilization phase, usually comprised of some little better coordination between agencies, identification of some funding sources, and tactics and strategies for recovery put in place. This is kind of where we are now, actually in the middle of the emergency response and the stabilization phase. And the third phase, when you essentially start implementing the strategies that you thought about and put these strategies to action and gradually move towards recovery and prosperity once again. And we think there's a 4th phase, which we added, which is often ignored, which you know, we call institutionalization. And this is like, during a crisis, we see many problems that are, you know, that we didn't see in the same light before. You know, it's like, you know, small businesses, who's getting impacted, how they're getting impacted, are they better prepared, are we better prepared? And it just leads to creative solutions during the adaptive recovery phase in all disasters. This has happened in hurricanes, this has happened in earthquakes, and, you know, in other cities all over the country. And we tend to go back to our old ways. And I think it's really important to think that if there are really creative ideas that we're coming up with right now, how do we actually take them forward and make them more permanent and make them a part of our longer term strategy? And I think it's just an idea to keep thinking about, both as the GPAC as well as city staff members. I think the city is already doing a lot in a very quick turnaround time as part of the recovery. And I would ask actually Miguel to talk a little bit about the various initiatives that the city has, Louis, sorry, to talk about the various initiatives that the city has put in place right now.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good evening. My name is Miguel Garibay. Thank you for giving us a chance to talk a little bit about some of the things we did. If I've only been with the city for a few months, and if you would have asked me, 3 or 4 months ago, where we would be today, obviously this would not have been anywhere near the top of my list. But luckily, through the leadership of our city council and our city manager, JJ Murphy, we were able to really jump into the emergency response fairly quickly, and to be quite honest, a lot faster than a lot of other cities across the state. Early on, we knew, and through our local officials' leadership, that this wasn't an issue that was just centered, focusing on just Palmdale. So we ended up taking a much broader regional approach, understanding that the people that live in Lancaster and Quartz Hill and Little Rock were all going to be impacted. So that we needed to take that approach as we kind of started looking and rolling out programs to support our residents and the local businesses. So early on, the first thing that we did was really trying to connect our business community with the resources that were available through SBA and other federal and state programs, giving them the information, helping them walk them through the process, answering those questions so that they can be better prepared to move forward with their businesses, sharing information as it became available, and finding easy ways to do some of that. We also hosted, in partnership with other organizations, trainings and webinars on these various programs, again, just to provide an additional resource to help these communities that maybe have never even seen an SBA loan application. So we try to do our best to bring those resources here locally and offer that training to them. Then we started kind of transitioning into, okay, how do we help specific industries? One of the first programs that we were able to launch was a program to help our restaurants, which is called the Take Me Home Tonight program. Once we figured out that they were going to be allowed to do some curbside pickup and be open for takeout, then we jumped in and really tried to find a way to help promote these existing businesses and to make it easier for them to get to let the people in the community know what was going on there. So we created an interactive map, connected people, did some promotion on their behalf, again, to try to support some of these mom and pop businesses that were really deeply impacted by the program. One of the programs that we're doing now to help kind of jumpstart our local retail businesses is a partnership, a regional partnership with the city of Lancaster and the Lancaster and Palmdale auto dealers, which is called Operation Jumpstart. So we partnered to provide gift cards with any new or used car purchase, with the intent that that money would be reinvested into the local communities to support those retail businesses here in town and to keep that money circulating here locally. One of the other things that we did early on is really, again, working with partnerships. We recently created a North County coalition of the cities of Lancaster, Palmdale, and Santa Clarita to really make our case that this part of Los Angeles County is unlike any other. As many of you know, that we have a lot of open space. The numbers for the testing are a lot lower. So we're working together to try and accelerate the safe reopening of our business community so that we're not all treated the same as the rest of LA County. And as we continue going forward, what we've spent a lot of time doing is actually reaching out, talking to residents, talking to the businesses, and trying to figure out what are these needs as we move forward. At some point in hopefully the near future, all businesses will be able to reopen. So what does that next 6 months look like? What does it look like a year from now, 2 years from now? How can the city come in and provide some of those services to help them? So we're doing a lot of surveys, we're having a lot of conversations, and we're using that information to create programs to support those businesses. Again, we're looking at a lot of different options currently. And if anybody has feedback in terms of things that their business may need, or even from a resident standpoint, please feel free to contact our staff. We'll throw in the phone number and email into the group chat. So I would encourage you offline to reach out to us directly. We'd be more than happy to sit down and talk. And again, we're taking a different approach. Instead of us just sitting here and trying to create some of these things that we think would be beneficial, we're reaching out to you and trying to figure out what those needs are. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things that we're doing. Again, we know that this isn't going to end once the stay-at-home orders are lifted. This is going to continue on for a long time. So what we're trying to do is long-term position ourselves to make sure that we're prepared to help out in any way we can, and to support our business communities remain open.
Thank you, Louis. Apologies for misnaming you. Usually I'm at the receiving end of that, but you have the easiest name.
No worries.
I think I want to reiterate the fact that actually what the city has done with its resources and creating partnerships in such a quick turnaround is really exemplary. And I say that because as a consultant who's actually working with a number of cities who are actually going through similar, everybody's in the same boat. This is, these initiatives are really remarkable and really to take note. And I think the Renaissance Plan is quite impressive, and hopefully you're able to think of creative ideas to sort of sustain this and help your businesses recover in the months to come. With that, I'm going to actually move to the most interesting part of our conversation. First, are there any questions? And maybe we should jump into the open discussion as well.
In the interest of time, I'd like to keep questions limited to about 20 to 30 seconds. So we can go through a couple of questions we've received online, and if our members of the GPAC have any, if you want to raise your hand, we can answer those. Because we have about 25 minutes left, I'd like to spend the next 15, 20 minutes going through a discussion and getting additional feedback.
Teresa Lamping had her hand up very patiently during the last phase of that presentation. If you'd still like to ask a question, now would be a great time.
Yes, thank you so much. In regards to the general tax fund revenues, can we have some examples of what that other category was? Because it was quite large, especially where the city of Palmdale was concerned. So I just wanted to kind of put those in a category of some sort. So if I could have some examples of that.
Right. I was going to defer to Garrett on the specifics of that. I just want to pull up the slide.
The next one. I think it's the next slide. That one.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can go into that other category, but some of it is like documentary transfer tax. So there's a fee that you pay when you sell property. Some of it could include grants. Also intergovernmental revenue, so like transfers between funds that aren't the general fund that are transferred into the general fund. And then sometimes like investment earnings as well. So there's a lot of different things, and that's just a couple of the categories under other.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
I have one question from the group in a chat, just asking for clarification, information on meal delivery for seniors and those who are at risk. Is that information available on the city's website? Just wanting to confirm.
Yes, and we'll make sure to share the link in the Zoom chat as well, or we can follow up with everybody regarding that program. There's a couple of different ones our cares or our through our Palmdale Cares campaign and our Saves group here in the city, we've actually expanded quite a bit of meal services and aid to those in need. So we'd be happy to share that information with everybody.
Great. I don't see any other. So Amita, we can move on to the discussion portion.
Sure, and this is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And to kick that off, I just wanted to read off a couple of questions we are getting through the YouTube live stream. And the first one is related to, are there plans to focus on building out more missing middle housing, things like townhouses, 3 flats, 2 flats, etc. These types of housing can be much more affordable and attract more buyers, which in turn attracts developers. This type of housing could really be good for Palmdale. And then there are 2 other comments related to conservation of Joshua trees in the city.
Excellent. Again, these, I think this is the interesting part in getting your input, and this is where, you know, hopefully, you know, more of you will unmute and raise your hands and give us your ideas. I think these questions on the screen are just guiding questions, but the bigger idea is to, you know, think about how the general plan can be aligned with some of the market opportunities that we talk about. How can the city take advantage of its known strengths? And maybe fix some of the challenges and mitigate for them along the way. I think the first thing, I think maybe, you know,
sure,
a couple of people mentioned really early on was, you know, Palmdale's already strong in manufacturing, partly because of the aerospace business and Plan 42. The aerospace business is cyclical sometimes. It's driven by sort of political, federal decisions. You know, while some of these large contracts are hopefully going to stay, they could change in a snap. So how should Palmdale capitalize on its strengths, and how can it actually attract sort of other industries, and what should it focus on? You know, again, I'd say we don't, you know, obviously some of these decisions are going to be economic. I think part of it is what, and part of it is where. I think it's also to think about, you know, Palmdale has significant land, and I think part of the challenge of expanding industrial has been infrastructure. So I think we have to think about them in sort of parallel, and how do we cluster our existing industries, and how do we put them in a place where they can feed off of each other, service each other, have the right infrastructure, and how can we make their employees get the right kind of amenities?
Right, and this is Carlene. So to speak a little bit about kind of the housing and I guess the missing middle. So we have had a couple recent approvals from our Planning Commission and City Council on some multifamily housing developments, which is extremely exciting. We know as a city that we saw kind of a stagnant time where it was really just that standard single family, you know, 7,000 square foot lot type of development. So having that alternative option for our aerospace industry as well as our healthcare industry is something that's going to be, you know, really filled up really quickly. So those applications, like I said, were recently approved. We have some more that are also being proposed, and as part of the California high-speed rail, and something that is being incorporated and talked about within, you know, the general plan in general is our transit area specific plan. So that area around our transit station, we are thinking about higher densities and more of a mix there. So that's something that the GPAC obviously will consider going forward as well. And when that plan gets finalized and is in front of our Planning Commission and City Council, we'll see kind of what that can help stimulate in our prime downtown area. And then Simran, if if
Yeah.
on there was a Joshua tree comment. I didn't actually, can you go ahead and repeat that?
Sure. There were two comments related to the Joshua trees, and they're both tied with the desire to preserve the areas where there are a lot of Joshua trees. So it says the
Sure.
Joshua tree forest between Avenue M and Avenue O, Sierra Highway and 10th Street West should be planned as open spaces so they can become conservation areas.
So we do have a Joshua tree preservation plan within the city. So as projects impact, Joshua trees are required to, do certain things before they move them or if they move them and things like that. So Joshua tree preservation is definitely something that the city considers, and we really look to maintain, the desert feel that is out here that so many of us have moved out here for.
Matt, you had a question or comment?
I just wanted to, on the first bullet point, what additional industries may need. As some people may know, we have miles of conduit and dark fiber that's not being utilized. And, I think that there's a lot of unknown on how much we can expand different industries with that technology, especially, with the discussions with the film industry possibly coming out here based on capacity down in the Burbank area and Santa Cruz and such being limited. The other thing on the bullet point for expanding the tax base, I think from a former commuter, the spillage, the tax spillage is, I don't know what that rate is in this area, but I can speak from personal experience where after I got off work, I'd shop down below versus, keeping the money local. I think that's a key thing to keep the jobs local so we can expand on that tax base. My last point was, further exploring the impacts of maybe doing a mining tax as we have different mining industries out here, and capitalizing on some type of tax to help repair the roads and different things like that and infrastructure. And that was it.
Thank you, Matt.
I got something on the housing that Carlene just brought up. EDUs was mentioned in the back in this, and I look at EDUs as a stopgap to a housing shortage. I think it's important that we keep our neighborhoods attractive and functioning well. And I think EDUs can be a burden, be more of a detriment than they're a problem, I think, at some times. Can you speak to that?
I think we may be talking about two different things. I think one is EDU, which is equivalent dwelling unit, which is just a metric of like how many households and how many jobs you have.
Okay.
And I think you may be referring to ADUs, which is accessory dwelling units, which is essentially
yes, you're right.
a local law that may allow a single family home to have another unit in the back or as part of the same lot.
Yeah, and that's
actually it's required by state.
Yeah. We have to comply. So but we are as I guess restrictive as the state law allows.
Yep, Pat, the state law requires cities to allow the ADUs by right and limit what restrictions cities can put on those. So the city of Palmdale is limited in what they can do with that.
Design standard.
Yeah, and there's new laws about that as well. The state legislature has passed SB 330, for example, which says that you need to have objective design standards. So housing developments can, if they meet all the design standards and the development standards, they get approval by right, and it's not a discretionary process. And cities are required to have objective design standards. We had one other question through the chat about an update on the possibility of passenger air service in Palmdale. Mike Behan, would you like to give a quick update?
Yes, we're actually looking at potential commercial air service in a new location that is located at the southeast corner of Avenue M as in Mary and Sierra Highway. We are currently working with the Air Force and pursuing a joint use agreement. We've hired a consultant team to help us look at the feasibility of an airport. And I think it's key to point out that this would be a regional type of airport to serve this region and areas that are close to this region. We've also done a rough order of magnitude study to look at costs. I think in terms of next steps, we need to hear back from the Air Force regarding the joint use agreement. And then also, keep talking to the airliners. We've definitely got interest. We definitely know that there's demand here. We're hearing it from Edwards Air Force Base and from Plant 42 on the civilian side to the contractor side to all the aerospace contractors. So there's definitely demand here. Recently, when we met with the FAA, I think one of the problems we had in the past was the messaging. We were selling that we could be the future Los Angeles, LAX North. And they said, the FAA representative said, as long as we stick with a regional message of providing service to the residents, to the aerospace contractors, we should be successful. And one thing I think I left out is that the property that we're looking at the airport to be developed on is owned by the city, so that's definitely helpful. Now, one more thing in terms of an opening date, I don't think we quite have that yet. I think there's still some work to be done. I mean, we'd like to be open yesterday, but I think we're still a few years away in terms of the environmental document that will require CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and NEPA clearance. That will probably could take up to 2 years, and then we have to go through the entitlement process. So optimally 3-4 years. It could be longer.
Thank you. Juan, you had your hand raised.
Yes, the last meeting that we were all face to face, we hovered over maps in groups and pointed out what we thought would be good places for multi-unit dwellings and parks. Is there any analysis to that? Do we have any input, or was it ever formulated as to what the end result of all of that was?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And I should have probably noted this in our introduction, but I didn't, so I'll do it now. The input we received from the GPAC is, firstly, it's documented in the minutes that you received. And secondly, we are working on the land use alternatives, taking the GPAC's input into account, which we'll bring back to you for your review at the next meeting. Originally, if this was an in-person meeting, we would have been able to discuss the economic data that we've been discussing today in addition to the alternatives, but we thought because it's a virtual format, it might take a little bit longer to get through the material, so we postponed that to the next meeting. Excuse me.
I just had a quick question in respect to what I think Carlene was talking about. I was watching the city council meeting a couple weeks ago when they approved the rezoning by over here, I think by the church, right? To squeeze in a bunch of multi-family, and they did that cool presentation and all of that. So between that and all the houses being built over here behind or next to Highland as well, how does that kind of fall into where things are at on the use? I mean, all of the land use right now, because we just keep squeezing in another 400, 500 housing units in a 1 mile square radius. Again, that's kind of going against what originally was designed in the old GPAC, I guess. I mean, in the old plan. We've rezoned it. We okayed rezoning and moved it to multi-use now and all of that. How does that fall into the future planning, and how does that actually, just kind of curious how that works as to the plan that was passed originally, where they're kind of just rezoning everything outside of that plan?
Sure. So obviously, this GPAC has been developed for a reason. Our general plan is extremely out of date. And as part of that, it's been hard for the market and for our development community to be able to respond to the needs, including housing. And so that's why I think that we are seeing, maybe some more general plan amendment zone changes right now to be a little bit more intense in terms of housing, because that's really that missing market that we don't have here. We have a lot of single family homes, which is great. But, as we've been discussing tonight, that doesn't fulfill everyone's needs and doesn't necessarily attract, the types of industries potentially that want to be up here. They need to house their people as well. So we need to have that variety of housing to offer those people. So I think that it kind of speaks to a little bit of both, a little bit of the outdateness of our general plan and why we're here, as well as to, that market factor that we're also talking about.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I love it. I love it. It's all concentrated on the west side, very close proximity to each other, which seems to kind of run afoul of things that.
Yeah, we actually have one that's going to June that's on the east side. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the goal, Colby, is that when the general plan is adopted, the new land use map will allow adequate areas for these kind of developments, that there would not need to be legislative action for those developments to occur. That adds both time and a cost on those developments.
Okay, thank
you. There are a couple of other hands up.
Deborah?
I just had a quick comment, and it has to do really with the multifamily. I know that a lot of us spoke about that with the multifamily. We also wanted to make sure that we did not make the mistakes that happened the first time around, that we're developing with amenities, and we're looking at developing this to be a really nice area. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Matt, you had your hand raised. Do you still have a comment?
I just had a question. I didn't see a question section after the next steps. Jumping ahead, is there still plan to have the workshop on June 16th for the general plan update?
I'm not sure what that date is referring
to.
I
know what you're talking about. I will step in. This is Carlene. And the June workshop for City Council has been changed to the budget. We are going to be in front of City Council and Planning Commission as a joint workshop for the general plan, including land use alternatives, and kind of Simran will talk a little bit about this, but that would be in September.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Jason, you have your hand raised. If you can keep it short, I'd appreciate it.
I know I'm more aggressive than everybody else, but I agree with Matt Harris. We need to concentrate more on the private aerospace industry. Next week, we'll be sending a man to space, not from NASA, but from the private sector. And Antelope Valley needs to concentrate more on the private aerospace jobs and government contracts. The other thing is, Palmdale's a gold mine. It just never has been promoted right. And we need to do as much as we can to promote Antelope Valley. Mike Garcia is a perfect example. He's our new congressman. He's a first-generation Mexican who's now our congressman. We have believe it's 90% of the kids in Palmdale School District are Hispanic. They're first generation. Their parents have no education. If we don't concentrate on a junior college for Palmdale and a university, we're basically asking Palmdale to be poverty in Antelope Valley. We have to concentrate on higher education. Right now, my cousin, he works at Northrop Grumman, Plant 42, 6 days a week, making $25 an hour. With his salary, he can only afford a $200,000 townhouse. Developers can only build townhouses and make a profit at $250,000 to $300,000. We got to do something about that.
Thank you, Jason.
Well,
okay. Are there any other comments? Melissa, have you received any public comment?
We have one public comment, which I can read now. If you wouldn't mind switching to the next slide, just in case anyone else wants to submit anything from the YouTube stream. We have one comment so far. Someone else needs to mute. Okay, sorry. Official comment says, the way to expand aerospace is to provide a place people want to live. Overall, aerospace contractors are moving jobs to other sites because of limited hiring and retention successes, school quality, social places, just out of college singles and other community members. Community opportunities like clubs and family activities are more important to organically growing the footprint in Palmdale than directly catering to those companies. And that is the only comment we've received so far. If we hear anything else in the next 2 minutes, I will let you all know.
Great, thank you.
Excellent comments. I also would urge the group to keep thinking about, what are ways not only that we can get more employees in industries, but also the employees that we already have. What are the amenities in addition to housing? What are the amenities that we should be focusing on and where to keep them engaged? I mean, a lot of the things we heard was that, you have the jobs. Some of them are super commuters, are commuting from other states and using hotel rooms, but a lot of them are actually living in the region. They're just not living in Palmdale. And one of the barriers is housing choices. The other barrier is just, recreation, entertainment, and a lot of them are younger people. So it's that mismatch between where can we create a place and go from there.
Yeah, and that's something we heard consistently through our through the first phase of community engagement. And I suspect we'll continue to hear that desire and need as we move through the alternatives and the rest of the general plan. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Amitabh? Thank you. So before I talk about next steps, I wanted to point out that there was a lot of information that was presented in the meeting today. And I'm sure as you digest all this information, especially in light of the commentary that accompanied it, if you have additional questions or comments, please feel free to send an email to the project email address, which is generalplan@cityofpalmdale.org, or if you have Carlene's direct email, feel free to send it to her as well. Sorry, Carlene.
Good.
Simran, one quick point. I mean, what we presented was actually a summary of the existing conditions report, and there is a separate sort of report with more explanation and words.
That's right. Yes.
Available.
Yeah, and
that's
just a
right.
reminder
and that report
that report is posted on the project website underneath this GPAC meeting, and it was also emailed in advance to the group. And if you need a link to it, just let us know.
And for the members of the public, the report is already available on the website, and this presentation will be posted there if it isn't already as well. So briefly, the next steps is we'll be bringing back the 3 land use and circulation alternatives that our team has developed to you for your review in the upcoming weeks. And then following the analysis of those alternatives, we'll have a 6 to 8 week period of intense community engagement again. The form that engagement will take will be different than what we did the last time around, which was all in person. We had 2 community workshops, 6+ pop-up workshops, as well as study sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council. Most of the engagement is anticipated to be virtual, and so we'll bring back more details about how that engagement will occur the next time we meet. And as Carleen noted, we'll be bringing back the alternatives along with all the input we've received to the Planning Commission and City Council in September, get their input and direction on the developing the preferred land use alternative. Following which we'll begin the development of policies and the general plan document itself. And I think that's all we have. Carleen, I know you wanted to make some closing remarks, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. I know that time is valuable, and I appreciate everyone participating and taking this seriously. Definitely appreciate Councilmember Carrillo, who is also viewing via YouTube. That's wonderful to have that support and that input. Also, great job. I think that this was, our first virtual one. I ultimately think that it went really well. I appreciate everyone's participation, and I just hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person sooner rather than later. But I appreciate everyone being flexible. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you all taking the time. Have a good night, and we'll see you on Zoom soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.